Mayor's Rep with the Mayor, Peter Christie. And JB Portillo.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Mayor's Wrap. We're here again with Mayor Christie.
Morning.
Good morning. And I'm excited, as always, to see what's happened since we talked last.
There's always a lot happening, which is great.
I know. You want to start with the really good part, the financials?
Sure, we'll go through the financials. These financials are as of June. And if you remember from what I've said before, we're always 2 months behind because it takes the state 2 months to collect the sales tax and then send it over to us. So these set of financials were actually published in August, and my finance director is now working on publishing the next set, which will be July for September. So we're halfway in to the year, and I'm pleased to report that we're a little over $1 million over budget in our revenue, and on our expenses, we're about $3 million under. Now that will change as the years go on, but we will not exceed the budget in expenditures, and I'm hoping that we're going to continue to overperform on the revenue.
Could I ask you what's prompting that? What's making it over revenue?
When I look at it, it's a whole bunch of things. The city sales tax is up. The county tax is up, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Or later on, when we talk about census, because that's going to change. Franchise fees are up. Franchise fees is I think it's 4.5% that we collect from the cable companies, et cetera, because they're crossing our easements. The property tax revenue is higher than anticipated at $89,000. So it's all tiny little bits. And the ambulance fees are at $302 higher. And I questioned Chief Sims to begin with, and he's telling me that they're doing many more runs than they have done in the past years.
So that's kind of bad, but...
Well, it's more indicative of the change in the demographics because we're now getting a younger segment that's actually using the ambulance.
Gotcha.
Earlier this year, we completely outsourced all our ambulance billing. It had been in-house since we became a city, and there were many, many inefficiencies. There was a backlog, and so we just said, let's just part ways. I talked to some of the other mayors, and they outsourced it a long time ago. So what we've seen is an increase in the revenues, which is great. So that's 302 as well. Okay. That's contributing to that over budget situation on the revenue. The cash on hand, a lot of people call it cash reserves, but the cash on hand currently, or as of this statement, is $11.5 million. And you've heard me talk about this before, where we always have to have 25% on hand per the ordinance I put in place back in May of 2018. And that's 25% of our unrestricted revenue. Unrestricted. And that means it's revenue that has not been specifically given to us for a certain project, such as the Walton Family Foundation or other people who have given us funds or other entities that have given us funds. And so we're supposed to have 25%, and we're actually at 50%.
Yes, you are.
So we're doing very well. There's one thing that somebody brought up, and I won't mention names, but thank you for bringing it up because it tells me that somebody's actually looking at these things, is the statement of assets, liabilities, and fund balances, and was absolutely astounded at it's called a current ratio. And it's something that I look at all the time on any financial statement. And what you look at is your total current assets and your total current liabilities. Right. And you better have enough current assets to cover your current liabilities. That's right. And so the auditors usually like to see a 1-to-1 or better 2-to-1. Well, I'm pleased to tell you that our total assets as of June, which and they are all current assets, is $13.5 million. and our liability is $235,000.
You're kidding me.
So we're well over.
Yes, you are.
So he was just astounded that that was happening. It's because we carry very little debt.
Yeah.
So he said, well, what about the bond? Well, the bond is not carried on our books.
Right.
Because we never see the revenue from the bond because the vendors that are working on all the projects are paid directly by the trustee. And the trustee also pays down the bond because the 1% sales tax doesn't come to the city either. It goes over to the trustee. So it's not carried on our books. And so if you have ever wondered that, if you're brave enough to go through the financial statements, and if you have any questions, of course, people can always ask.
Yes.
But bottom line is, financially, we are extremely strong.
Good deal.
Yep.
So bond update, what does that mean? Is that the new public safety building?
Well,
What
there's
is that?
actually, there's the three projects.
Yes.
There's the new fire station number 3 on Glasgow that's coming along very nicely. We're still hoping to open in October. There is a bit of a hiccup.
The doors.
The doors to the bays.
Yes.
The 3 in the back, 3 in the front have now gone on back order, or they've been on back order for some time. It's not known if we'll get them in October, so Chief and I are hoping that it'll be still feasible to open that thing up, even though we don't have doors on the bays.
Could you do gates or something temporarily? or-
Well, probably not.
Yeah, just curious.
The inner doors are all locked and coded. So we'll see, but I would like to have it open. And I think, as we discussed before, the old station number 3, we're not going to tear down as
Right.
we originally thought. And that'll be a substation for our friends at the street department, so we can have salt and sand out there as well and turn around faster on the roads on the west side. Then we've got the police station. Of course, we turned the ground on July 28th, and unfortunately you weren't here because you were tripsing around the world, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
And
yes. But we had people there.
Oh, your
we knew
people were
about
there?
it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so we successfully turned dirt, and now they're aggressively in there digging, and they're flattening out the land and getting ready to go. That's still on track to open in December of next year.
Of next year. Yeah, we had the police chief here the other day, and,
Yes.
and we were talking about all the good things that were happening at the fire station, and I looked at him and he says, well, if you want to see some trees that have recently been taken down and some stump grinding, then sure.
Yeah, they're well beyond that now.
I know.
In fact, they've been doing so much digging, and this is part of my, I guess, being frugal. All the topsoil that they were pulling off, we asked if we could have the topsoil.
What are you going to do with it?
We just got it in a big mound behind the street department at the moment, but we'll find it.
I'm sure you
we'll
will.
find something to do with it.
Yes.
And because I hated seeing that just being
Well, it's a
carted
premium
off.
here in Bella Vista.
That's right. So I just want everybody to know that I continue to be frugal with your taxpayer dollars.
That's right.
And then the third project is the fire training tower that we've talked about many times, and a small training facility at its base. I think we've found the land. It's up near the Missouri border. We hope to get it appraised, and then we'll have to go to Cooper and negotiate the purchase. Cooper is very much in favor of having the training tower here. They understand the need for it, which is great. And that'll probably be the easiest of all 3 to build,
Oh, okay.
because a lot of it is simply poured concrete. And so Chief feels quite happy that he can get that done hopefully before the end of next year as well. We don't have to get it done by the end of next year. I think they're probably trying to give me a going away present.
Yes. Well, that would be a beautiful thing to happen, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. So that's the status of the bond projects. Let me turn for a minute to bond financing. For those of you that have been following everything that we've been doing, you may remember that the bond is a 25-year bond, but we had felt quite confident that it would probably be paid out in 12 years. Yesterday, which I guess I should say was what, the 14th?
Yes.
My finance director and I met with our municipal advisors, which is Raymond James, and they actually pulled together a projection that, based on the current tax receipts for the 12-month period ending August of this year, August of last year, we're going to have the bonds retired by April the 1st of 2031.
Wow.
So that's a little less than 10 years from now. And given the growth that we're seeing, I think it's probably quite plausible that we'll be able to do this. So that's a good news story.
It is.
And of course, we got an exceptionally good interest rate on it at 1.1%.
Yes.
So I was very happy to see that this surplus tax receipt actually going and helping, and it's going to be good.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. Well, tell me about all the construction that's, well, I see it in one place anyway,
Yeah.
the bridge construction on Lancashire.
Sure. I thought I'd just give you the lowdown. I can't remember if I did this on the last show, so I pardon if I'm being redundant. I want to give you some facts about the two bridges. The Tanyard Creek Bridge, the existing one is 31 feet long. The new one is going to be 120 feet long. To mitigate any problems that might be coming up in the future as far as flooding.
Now, is that going to change from the position it's in?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, go ahead.
But if you remember, we had the so-called sinkhole
Yes.
on that thing some time ago last year. It wasn't truly a big sinkhole, but yeah, there was a hole that could have done damage. And that was because the flooding was up and it was hitting the bridge. And it had been hitting the bridge for years and years and years, and finally it triggered this. So it's going to be 4 times longer. The width currently is 26 feet, and the new one is going to be 46 feet. So they're adding another 20. Today we have 2 11-foot lanes. Tomorrow will be 2 14-foot, which is up to the code. And today we have 2-foot shoulders. Tomorrow there will be 3-foot grass berms and a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides.
Oh, excellent.
So that will greatly improve that whole bridge. Of course, the plan is on the north side sidewalk. That'll be probably primarily for bikes. The Walton Family Foundation has paid for the sidewalks. And so, the bicycle thing continues, which I personally think is great.
Yes.
So the estimated completion of the Tanyard Creek Bridge is late spring, early summer of next year. Now, Little Sugar Creek Bridge, which is just up a bit around that horrific bend, just down from City Hall. The existing bridge is 287 feet long, but the next one will be 238. So they're going to take a little bit of the bridge and move it a bit.
I was
Okay?
wondering, yes.
Yeah. And the one today is 47 feet. Tomorrow it'll be 80 feet wide. Today we have 3 11-foot lanes with a 10-foot median. Tomorrow it'll be 4 11-foot lanes with a 12-foot median and a 12-foot side path on the north side, which will be primarily for bikes and walks. And on the south side, there will be a foot sidewalk of 6.5 feet. So the estimated completion date of that is well into probably the summer of 2023. I did get an update for this program from the contractor, and the contractor is the same one that's working on the bypass. Mm-hmm. So you'll see
SAP.
all,
Yes.
it's Emery SAP, and you've probably seen all the rock that they're putting down as the
Yes.
base before they put, the pavement in. That's all coming from the bypass. And it makes sense. I mean,
Yes.
you've got all this rock over there, and Emery SAP is doing that project, so they approached RDOT, and it's an RDOT project over here, so they said, sure, just take the rock. So that's saved considerable dollars and time and effort as well.
Yes, yes.
So this is the email that I got back asking for an update. We are anticipating switching traffic to the Tanyard Creek detour, and that's what you see them building now, and starting bridge work on both bridges in early to mid-October.
Oh,
Completions at this point would remain the same, later next spring for Tanyard Creek, and all phases of Little Sugar complete in spring or early summer of 2023. People should expect to see some slightly new traffic patterns over the next couple of weeks. So stand by for more,
Yeah.
but it's certainly, it's going to be changing that whole traffic pattern. Some people have said, well, what are they going to do with that temporary road, well, they're going to rip it out.
Of course.
Because it's a temporary easement from the POA. And they'll have to put it all back together, although RDOT does have an easement as well, but not nearly as wide as this detour is today. So it's a work in progress, and what I promise to do is if I get any other updates before we have our next mayor's wrap, I'll send them over to you, because I know you have other programs, and you can
We
clue
do.
everybody in.
And I get it out to all my social media places
Great,
too. So
great,
anything you do that you want us to get out there, that's our job. We'll do that for you.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, do you want to take a quick break?
Sure, let's do that.
All right, let's do that.
We will be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Mayor's Wrap with our host, JB Portillo.
Hey there, everybody. We're back. And now we're going to talk about a subject that has recently happened that I'm very excited about, and that's the 2020 census.
Yeah, the 2020 census numbers have come out at the high level. We haven't seen the actual breakdown in demographics, which is really something I want to see by age group, et cetera, and by zip code. But nevertheless, at a very high level, our census came in at 30,104 people. I was actually hoping it would be a little higher, and I'll get into why in a minute. But to put it into perspective, in the 20,000 census, Bella Vista was at 15,632 people. In the 2010, it jumped to 26,526, and that was as a result of Walmart saying that all the vendors must now have a presence here. They must have an office in the immediate area, and so they had to start bringing in employees, and that's when the boom actually started. Then we hit the recession. Now it's not reflected in these numbers, but everything kind of ground to a halt. And then you've heard me talking about the new residential housing permits. If you go to the end of 2013, we issued a whopping 35.
Yes.
Last year, we issued 417. We hit 417 at the end of August this year.
Yes.
So we're probably going to be well over 600. And there seems to be no end in sight from what I can see and what I'm being told. There are still more and more people coming to Northwest Arkansas. And it's not just us, because when you go through, you can see the growth all over the place. It's a little different when you get down south and east into the Delta. They're actually losing people. But from a growth perspective, Northwest Arkansas is one of the fastest growing areas in the country. So I feel fairly confident about the number, because for the second time in a row, we had an 85% response rate from the residents before they even started knocking on doors. And we did the same thing in 2010, and in both of those instances, no other city was even close to us. So that gives me a certain comfort that the number's right. Why I was hoping that it would be more is because we get currently 11.98% of the county sales and use tax. And that's actually the bulk of the sales tax, because we don't generate not even close to that amount in our own city, because we don't have the large commercial base that we would all like to have, and we all know the reasons why. Although I think that might change in the not too distant future, so stand by.
All right, I will.
Yeah. But so it means that we're now going to be getting 10.59. That's a haircut of $815,000 a year. And so we knew it might hit us, so we've been planning for it. You can't simply take, the wonderful cash on hand and keep doling out to make up the difference. That's not a sustainable answer. So what we've been doing is working with the county to understand, okay, so there's a haircut, but what do you think your tax revenue is going to be next year, so that we can calculate off that. And then we've got to drill down and do some more work on just what do we think the property taxes are going to be like, because we're going to have quite a few come on the rolls in next year. Now, initially it looks as though it might be about $100,000, which helps to mitigate it somewhat. Just as a refresher on that, the way that the tax roll or the appraisal works on the taxes, it gets appraised, and everybody was just appraised this year in 2021, which as a sidebar may help us and push us up, to try and mitigate that loss. But the rule of thumb is you take that appraised value, you multiply it by 20%, and then you multiply that by, I think it's 0.06 something, and that's the current millage rate for the county.
Okay.
And includes us. And of course, 80% of that is for schools. Our share is 0.0055.
Oh.
So you have to multiply, the 20% times that. So it's not a huge number, although there is this feeling in some quarters that, well, it should be bigger than that because look at all the growth we've had. But at the end of the day, the math doesn't support any kind of whopping amount of money that's going to come in.
Right.
So I'm somewhat disappointed by the amount. We are going to see more growth, and that's why we continue to focus on the infrastructure. You may have seen more roads being paved and resurfaced this year because we doubled the budget from 1.2 to 2.4 million. And again, that's trying to stay ahead of the curve. My apologies to all of you who, of course, think that your roads are worse than everybody else. I understand that. But we actually have a plan laid out. If you remember, we had a company come in 2015 and 2017 and go over all the roads and tell us by type of condition and where do we have to focus first. So that's what we've been doing because, once I heard that if you let a road slip from one to the next one down, it'll cost you 6 times the amount of money to get it back to the previous one, let alone to where it should be. Exactly. And so that's the type of math that the street committee looks at when they're evaluating what streets need to be done.
Are you adding, well, adding's probably not a good word, but with all this new construction, I know that some of the roads, newer roads, are finished off. Is there a lot of that happening?
That's a good question. It's one that we've been talking about for quite some time because if you have a road that is platted,
right,
but there's no houses, and then somebody builds, are we going to actually pave it all the way down to the house? The answer is probably not because we have so many of those that have propped up in the last 2 years. It would pull money away from the resurfacing that needs to be done on the 550 miles we've already got done. So we will take it down to about 150 feet. Now, council has asked that we look at that again. So the street committee under John Flynn is looking at it, along with Superintendent Button, because it's really a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
I can understand that people want it paved all the way down, but it's very, very expensive. If it's a brand new road, it's upwards of 100,000, 120,000 a linear mile. Now, 150 feet doesn't feel that much, and that's why we've been doing it. But if you're a quarter of a mile down, well, that's a lot of money.
How many houses on that new potential road would you have to have before you do it?
It depends where the house is placed.
Gotcha.
If it's way at the end, you're going to be waiting a long time until everybody builds. Having said that, we do put a dirt base down and, we take a grader and we go over it. Because by law, we still have to make sure that there is access to the house. In fact, by law, we have to make sure that there's access to the empty lots. So we have a lot of, as you noted, platted streets or cul-de-sacs where there is no home, but people own the lots. So from time to time, especially in the fall, Streets Department will go around and they'll look at these platted roads with no homes. And if there's a tree down, then they'll cut it because it has to be passable enough for someone to get through so they can get to their property. And at times that's a real challenge. If you remember the windstorm we had in August of 2019, hope we never go through that again. We had a lot of trees down everywhere. So it took us until the end of October to clean everything up.
Gotcha.
But
well, I'm every time you say something, it prompts another question, so I'm sorry, we're a little off track, but not really.
Okay.
Anything else about the census before
No,
we move
no.
on? Okay, well, it's exciting. Now, this is a silly question, but eventually those signs that are all different, by the way, at every entry into Bella Vista, those will all be updated by the state?
Yes, that's the state's concern, that's not
Okay,
ours.
okay.
And yes, you're right, it seems to be different.
When you
no
come in
matter-
from Pea Ridge, it's one number, anyway,
Yeah,
it's just
no,
crazy.
I hear you.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our part of the American Rescue Plan.
Sure. As I've mentioned before, we have been allocated $5.9 million over 2 years, and you get the first half this year, which we have already received. It's in the bank because the Municipal League is saying that the final guidance from Treasury still hasn't arrived. And unlike the CARES Act, which was another chunk of money that we got last year and into a little bit of this year, but basically last year, you had to articulate in excruciating detail what you were going to spend the money on for every single project, which was fine, and then submit it, then they would give you the money. And, you know, in retrospect, that's probably a good way to do it because they, in all likelihood, won't come back to you later and say, well, no, that didn't work. This time, they're giving the money first and trying to give us some very broad guidelines as what you can and cannot do, which have yet to be finalized. Well, if you mess up and you do something and they come back later and say, oh, no, I'm sorry, that didn't work. I don't want us put in that position. I don't think any mayor wants to put their city into that kind of corner. It's the same at the county level. Now, at the county level, they're doing it a little differently because they've also got money that has been given to them separately or authorized for all the rent, you know, to stop people from being evicted, that kind of thing. And so they're covering the entire county, which covers all the cities as well. And you go down to Fayetteville, and they're doing certain things that are different as well. And you come up here, however, and we are different. So the very broad guideline that we have had so far for the expenditure of these funds is A, you had to have lost money between certain dates last year when the corona really hit. Well, we didn't. Because everybody, thank you again, I think I've said this before, decided to buy on the internet, and we had the new internet tax in place, so we actually made money. We didn't have a revenue loss, which is a good thing.
And you can get anything you need on the internet.
Yeah, that's true.
Or maybe not even need.
That's
but-
right. So then they said, if you have sewer projects, well, we don't own the sewer, it's private.
That's the wastewater.
That's right, that's village wastewater. If you have, and by the way, we tried to do an offshoot on septic and they wouldn't buy it. If you own a water system, then you can, well, we don't own a water system, and thankfully I'm glad we don't own one, but nevertheless. So we don't qualify there. So there are two areas where we do qualify. One is broadband, and the other one is cybersecurity. Now, as you and I have talked over the many months, years, we have spent a great deal of time, energy, and money building our infrastructure, our data infrastructure, and then protecting it. Everything from putting more and more secure software on top of it to having 3 backups for everything, including one in a small data center that we have in Pea Ridge. We did an exchange with Mayor Crabtree over there. He's got the ability to bring his crucial data here to a small data center that we have. And we're backing up all the crucial systems, such as finance, every hour, and it gets backed up in 3 places. So we've done all this. We've hired hackers. I've mentioned that before. They can't get through, but still you must be ever vigilant. And so now we're moving more and more stuff into the cloud. We're about halfway there. We're looking at possibly getting into double encryption logins, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. That is all that can be paid for by the American Rescue Plan. And so I have asked my IT director, give me a number so that I can go to council and talk to them about this. The other is broadband, and as some of you know, you don't have internet access. And people have been asking me to go to Cox and go to AT&T, which I have done for the last 6.5 years, and they are not willing to spend the money because their profit model doesn't work. However, if you as a resident and everybody else on your street wishes to pay, then we'll bring it in. And I think the minimum I've ever heard is $10,000 a household, which is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
So with the broadband, there is money available, or you can take some of your funds and you can put it towards it. Now, let's just say for the sake of argument that we kept $900,000 for the cybersecurity. So that leaves us $5 million. $5 million in the world of telecommunications to put in fiber doesn't go very far. But what I've been talking to AT&T and to Cox about is to get into a partnership. If I
with the city
With
and
the city.
them, not them together.
no,
Okay.
no,
That wouldn't work.
No, you never see them doing that.
Yeah.
And
That would be good.
it would be good. I've been speaking to the Municipal League about how we could possibly do this. We would have to do an RFQ or an RFP, and then frankly, the one that's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck is the one that's going to win. Meanwhile, there is more pots, or there are more pots of dollars that are popping up. The state has some money now because the governor is very, very anxious to get broadband out,
Yes.
especially into the rural areas.
Well, for education, for
That's
kids.
right.
Yes.
And they're working on a 25/3 upload download. That's not going to work here. It's got to be minimum 100. So nevertheless, he has a pot of money. Then I've got the president over here who's talking about an infrastructure bill, and he's got broadband money in there. So is it ever going to pass? Who knows? But if it does pass, how much of any of that infrastructure money, let alone broadband, is going to trickle down to all the cities? Nobody knows. So the other thing is the FCC wants to be the controller of all knowledge as to where the pockets that are underserved are located. Well, they tried to put together a map last year and it was all wrong. So now they're trying to get another map put together based on input from the carriers. Cox is actively working on that. I'm not convinced that AT&T is doing so. They may be relying on an old map that they've already put together. But nevertheless, Cox has been very diligent, they've been telling me, because we send both of them faithfully every month and have done so for years. Here are all the new home permits that we have issued with the actual address. And then if they want, and only Cox has asked for it at the moment, is we will then send them a map of the city, and the year to date are pinned so they can see where the clusters are. And you can see the clusters becoming more and more apparent on the west side because it's closer to the bypass.
Yes.
So the good news is we don't have to rush into this. You don't have to have the money obligated until 2024 and spent by the end of 2026. So I'm not going to rush into this and try and patch something together because I want it to last. As I think you know, I spent 22 years in the telecommunications industry.
Yes.
And some of the cities have been saying, well, I want to own the network and I want to lease it out and make some money on it. I don't even want to go there. Now, they may have a ghost of a chance because if you've got an electrical network and you've got sewers and you've got waters, then you can run fiber optics very efficiently between all of them so you can do your monitoring, okay?
Gotcha.
Once you get that started, then you can start looking at patches within the city. We don't have that, okay? If you own the network, here's the problem. You're into the break-fix business.
Exactly.
So if you've ever seen a fiber cut, in the industry when I was there, we used to call them whiskers, because you'll have hundreds of these very, very tiny strands, and you've got to put them back together again. And we obviously don't have the ability to do that in-house, so you would have to outsource it. Then the next thing you have to have is a network operating center. Now, it doesn't have to be huge, but the NOC is where the telephone calls come in when somebody has a problem on the network. Okay? So you've got to have somebody, or maybe a group of people, manning something 24/7 by 365, who are watching for alarms on the network, so they have to have a whole little IT set up as well. Point being, it gets very, very expensive. So what I'd rather do is take the money, go into a partnership, let's put the fiber in the ground, and call it a day, and that's it. Some people have said, and I was worried about this too, is if you go to an RFP or an RFQ and you give it to one of the carriers, are you creating a monopoly? And so I've gone down the legal rat hole on that, and the answer is no. Because you haven't cut off the other party from coming in at their own expense if they wish to do so. We are going to be spending a lot of time yet before I get to council, because I don't want to have just a hodgepodge thing and expect council to be able to understand and craft it together. There's only one other fellow on the council who has a telecom background, so I don't want to, get into all the acronyms and everything else. But it's definitely something that I believe that we as a city need to address.
This may not be a fair question, but you usually pull rabbits out of hats. Or you say, I don't know. What percentage of Bella Vista does not have access?
I don't know. I know roughly where the 4 or 5 holes, if you like, are. What I don't have is a map that shows me the end of service.
Gotcha.
And where it stops, and then how far is that from where it starts. I've had neighbors tell me, or residents tell me, well, look, it's just a quarter mile down there. Okay, that's fine, but the building is still going on, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I'd rather have a map from a carrier.
Gotcha, yeah.
Because they know for sure where everything is. And so that's one rabbit I can't pull out of the hat.
That's okay. You get most of them. Okay, let's, I think we have a final thing to talk about, the Benton County Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful that in essence says we need to do something with the county jail.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judge Mooring and Sheriff Holloway pulled together a bunch of us. March of last year, we had our initial meeting, and then COVID hit, so we didn't meet again until April of this year. I'm chair of that committee. We have police, parole, soon to have social workers. I've got judges all sitting on it along with the sheriff and the judge, the county judge. And we actually hired a consultant to help us because this is a huge problem. This is a jail that was built to last 25 years back in 1997, I believe. It was full by 2017 and has been full since.
Oh, I know, yeah.
And as a result, well, and then COVID hit, which, so the only way that the sheriff could try and get the social distancing was start releasing people from jail ahead of time with the judge's permission so that he could get the social distancing and everything else in place. But the problem is the jail was never built to handle a pandemic. So whenever anything hits, it doesn't have to be COVID. It could be measles, it could be anything. It'll spread like wildfire through it because it's an intense density congregate setting.
It certainly is.
And so the challenge facing us is, and as I mentioned, we had a consultant to help us with this, is we needed to have a plan. So we've devised a short-term plan and a long-term plan. A long-term plan is we probably need to build another jail. The short-term plan is, can we find a way for the county judge and the quorum court justices to allocate some of their ARP money to build a new pod? We don't know how many beds. That's going to be up to the consultants and everybody else. But the thought is we need to have a central intake where everybody gets tested. And if you end up being positive for whatever the flavor of the day is, COVID, flu, who knows, SARS, then you'll be going into special isolation units that have special air handling units, all that kind of thing, and medical facilities that are there. Because at the moment, the medical facility in the county jail is centralized in one area. And that means that people have to walk right through the whole jail to get there while you're spreading the disease. So I have made a pitch to Quorum Court asking that we be permitted to go and issue an RFQ. They gave it to us last week. And so the judge is in midst of getting that published. We'll see what the submissions are, what are the costs of doing an initial design, then we'll go back to Quorum Court again.
You have the land there. You have room to build it.
There's room, but there's a lot of floodplain in there as well,
Oh,
unfortunately.
yeah.
And then there's, as the judge mentioned to the justices, there's that whole Benton County, it's a work center, you know, for their streets and their roads and everything.
It is, yes.
And it's
It's
right
right
next
by the
door.
extensions.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when that was built, that was in the county and it was way outside Bentonville and way outside Centerton and everything else. But now, of course, it's right in the middle.
Yeah.
And so the judge would like to disperse and have satellites in more areas all across the county, which would better serve the residents. And so he kind of flew that by at the 50, 100,000 foot level to the justices, saying, you know, that's an option that we can look at that, because we already own the land.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but then you got the cost of setting up all the satellites. So this is going to take a lot of work for quite some time. I'll have to give it up at the end of next year. Somebody else will take in. Or you could have a criminal justice coordinator, which Fort Smith has at the moment. So I spent some time talking to her, the lady down there, got a lot of great info from her. But we need to be able to solve the jail problem because right now there's no room for misdemeanors.
Wow.
So that
Okay.
means if you have a misdemeanor and you decide, I'm not going to go to court, there's a warrant issued for your arrest because of an FTA, failure to appear. We have some that are up to 12 FTAs because they figured out there's no accountability, there's no action. Even if they arrest me on a traffic stop and they check for warrants and it's there, and they'll arrest me and they'll take me down to the county jail, I'll be released in an hour because there's no room at the inn.
Yeah.
And so we've got to get this settled, and there is stuff in motion, which is good, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
You know, I absolutely love these sessions we have, but I go away from here thinking, oh my goodness, all this stuff. but it's exciting. It's really super exciting. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? We're about to wind up for today. Is there anything else we need to let people know about other than just stay tuned, watch us? We're here
true.
for that reason.
That's
you know?
right.
And all these questions that come up. I think you told me not too long ago that at least 90% of the calls that come into City Hall really have nothing to do with the city.
Well, yes, and thank you for mentioning that. We don't sell anything because we don't do the dog tags anymore. That's
Right,
gone.
Right.
Brenda, who sits at the front desk, we actually monitored it throughout all of August. 99.6 of the people that come in, she's sending them somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we're actually thinking of somehow closing off maybe the entrance and having a phone there and more pamphlets. And we already have something that says, if you're looking for this, call this number, but there's no phone.
Mm-hmm.
So now they'll have a phone there that they can actually call.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then my thought would be, well, maybe we can keep that front lobby area open on weekends so that visitors here, if they want to get information, can actually get in. They won't be able to go through the next one or the next one, of course. And then if they want to phone anybody on the weekend, assuming that they're sitting at their desk or whatever, then the phone will be there. Of course, we're not going to let people call long distance.
No.
But that's something that we're bouncing around right now, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I feel just so full of information right now. So I can't wait to see what happens next month when we're here again.
And we will be.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next time.